I still don't know what possessed me to go into those mountains alone. Maybe it was the madness that creeps in when your world falls apart. In 2015, I ended a 14-year relationship, and my mind wasn't right. I told myself a solo hike through the Appalachian Mountains in Vermont would clear my head. I was a fool. A city fool who thought a few YouTube tutorials could make him a hiker. The first few days were almost peaceful. I met friendly hikers along the trail, kind souls who shared food, laughter, stories. For a while I felt safe, free. But confidence is a dangerous thing when you have no idea what you're doing. On the third day, I heard the sound of running water somewhere beyond the trail. It was comforting, like a soft promise of life. I veered off the path to find it, ignoring that voice in the back of my head telling me not to. I went deeper and finally found a small, thin stream cutting through the forest floor. Too small to have been so loud. Too small to make sense. Still, it was beautiful, quiet, secluded. I decided to camp there for the night. I shouldn't have. Every local I met had warned me, stay near the shelters. Don't wander off trail when the light starts to die. But I didn't listen. As night fell, the woods seemed to hum. Crickets, frogs, the whisper of the water. It was almost peaceful. Then I saw movement between the trees. My first thought was bear, but then I saw it. Something shaped like a dog, standing just far enough away that I couldn't make out its face. "Hey there," I called softly, trying to coax it closer. It didn't move, just stood there. So I did what any idiot from the city might do. I whistled. The moment the sound left my lips, the forest changed. It was like the world inhaled and forgot how to exhale. Every sound, the crickets, the frogs, the stream, just stopped. The silence was alive, pressing against me. And then from deep in the woods, something whistled back. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything human. It came from a distance, yet it carried through the air like it knew exactly where I was. A cold wave rolled through me, and the tiny hairs on my arms stood on end. I ran into my tent and zipped it up, heart pounding so hard I thought it would shake the nylon walls. For hours there was nothing, just silence. Not even the water seemed to move. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that I was tired, dehydrated, jumpy. But around midnight it came again, the whistle, louder, closer, and then came the footsteps. Not human, not animal, something between. Heavy, deliberate, and wrong. They circled my tent, slow and methodical. My breath hitched and I pressed my hand over my mouth. My other hand gripped the small knife I'd brought, useless comfort against whatever was out there. Then I saw it. A shadow passed across the tent wall. The moonlight caught it, a shape that looked vaguely human but too tall, too thin. I didn't dare move, and then a hand pressed against the tent, long fingers, bone-thin, skeletal. They dragged down the fabric with a sound I will never forget. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. The creature stood there breathing or at least mimicking the sound of breath. The air inside my tent felt like ice, and I could taste metal in my mouth from biting my lips so hard to keep quiet. Then from somewhere deep in the forest came that same whistle, slow, mocking, calling it back, and just like that, it was gone. The hand pulled away. The shadow faded. I heard movement retreating into the woods, then nothing. Just the stream again, as if the forest had exhaled. I sat there till dawn, knife in hand, unable to close my eyes. When the first light touched the trees, I packed up and ran out of there. I told myself I wouldn't talk about it. No one would believe me anyway. But I learned something that night. Something the old folks around these mountains have whispered for generations. When the night falls in the Appalachians, don't whistle. The ones who answer aren't human, and they don't like to be called. I haven't been back to the woods since. I never will. It's been 2 years since it happened. It was the summer season of 2023. I had just turned 27. My best friend Nate was clawing his way out of a brutal breakup. We both needed an escape, something raw, unfiltered, and far from people. We mapped out a route that would take us deep along sections of the Blue Ridge Parkway, then off onto the backcountry trails of southern West Virginia. 5 days in, 5 days out, Nate borrowed a satellite phone from his brother, though neither of us really believed we'd need it. The first day was perfect. We hiked about 10 miles, found a riverbank to camp beside, ate those vacuum-sealed meals that taste like wet cardboard, and watched the stars settle over the ridges. Nate talked about starting fresh. I talked about maybe quitting my job. We laughed a lot. The next morning, as we made our way deeper into the backcountry, we met an older man and a girl, maybe his daughter, coming from the opposite direction. They looked tired, maybe even shaken. We made the usual trail small talk until the man said, "You boys be careful out there. Bears ain't the only thing that hunts in these woods." By evening, we set up camp on a ridge overlooking a valley, the Blue Ridge stretching out below us like a dark ocean. As the sun dropped, Nate found something about 20 yards off, a small mound of rocks, maybe 2 feet high with a cow-bleached deer skull jammed on top. "Probably some weird mountain art," Nate said, forcing a laugh. But his hand was tight around the strap of his pack. I tried to make light of it, too, but something about that skull made me feel watched. The woods had gone dead quiet. No birds, no insects, just the slow drag of wind through the trees. We decided to move camp a little farther down the ridge. As we walked, Nate said, "Man, I don't like that kind of stuff. You remember my sister's cult thing back in 18? Those people start small. Bones, symbols. Next thing you know, they're worshipping something with teeth." I laughed nervously. "You think this is that?" He shrugged. "I don't think anything. I just don't like feeling like we're part of someone's ritual scenery." We settled near a creek and cooked dinner in silence. But just before dark, maybe 5 minutes into a short walk from camp, we stumbled onto something that froze us both. A decapitated opossum, its body untouched, the cut too clean to be from any animal. "Jesus," Nate muttered, crouching. I felt bile crawl up my throat. "That's a knife cut. Someone did this." We didn't talk after that. We just turned back. We agreed to keep watch in shifts through the night. I took the first. Around 3 a.m. I heard something. Soft footsteps, deliberate. I held my breath, my hand gripping the knife. Then silence. When morning came, we packed fast and started back toward the main trail. We reached the spot where we'd seen the opossum, and that's when my stomach dropped. The head was back on the body, stitched, with what looked like old rotting thread or strips of cloth. Nate whispered, "We need to go, now." We moved fast, no talking. The trees felt closer, heavier. I kept glancing over my shoulder, sure I'd see someone behind us. By nightfall, we still hadn't found the junction to the main trail. We had to stop. We didn't bother with a fire. The darkness in those woods felt alive, like the forest was holding its breath. I was half asleep when Nate shook me violently. His whisper was sharp, ragged. "Someone's out there." I saw movement. Between the trees, he handed me his hunting knife, kept the gun himself. I strained my eyes into the dark. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest sound like slow, dragging footsteps. Then something cold and rough clamped onto my arm. I shouted. Nate swung his hiking stick, cracking it against a man's skull. The figure dropped at my feet. He looked wrong. Mud-caked skin, wild hair, teeth black with rot. And there was something else. His joints were bent, distorted, like his bones didn't fit right. Before we could react, 2 more emerged from the dark, crawling, twitching, moving in jerks like marionettes. Nate fired once. The gunshot split the night, and we ran. Branches tore at our faces. My lungs burned. Behind us, I could hear them. Not running, but shuffling fast, limbs cracking like twigs. We didn't speak until we hit a low clearing, the moon glinting off the ridge above us. That's when I saw them again. 3 silhouettes, standing motionless on the ridgeline, their knees bent the wrong way, their heads tilted at impossible angles. Nate whispered, voice trembling. "What the hell are those things?" I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry, my hands shaking. He fumbled for the satellite phone, calling the police. His voice cracked between gasps. "We're on the Southern Blue Ridge Trail near marker 37. Please send help, someone's after us." They told us to head toward the nearest junction about 5 miles northeast. I don't remember much of that run. Just roots catching my boots, the sting of sweat in my eyes, the sound of something breathing behind us and too close, too human. When the trees finally broke open to a clearing around dawn, I saw flashing lights, rangers, rescue teams. Real people. Nate collapsed, sobbing. I was shaking so hard I couldn't even form words. They took us to a hospital. We passed every drug test they gave us. When the detectives came, we told them everything. A few days later, they confirmed what we'd feared. 5 people had gone missing in that region over the last few months. And worse, they found another altar, miles from ours. Same pattern, same skull. No one was ever caught. I am sure there's more than bears in those woods. The story I'm about to tell you isn't a pleasant one. It's haunted me for more than 20 years. This happened when I was 12. My brother Ben was 10, and our sister Molly had just turned 6. That summer, my parents decided to take us camping deep in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, a place so far off the beaten path, even the GPS would give up before you got there. My grandparents came with us. They were old mountain folks, born and raised in those hills. We pitched camp along the Williams River, miles from the nearest town. It was beautiful out there. Ancient trees, air thick with pine and moss. We fished, hiked, roasted marshmallows. I remember lying in my sleeping bag, staring through the mesh of the tent, thinking that nothing in the world could touch us there. Then, on the 3rd day, everything changed. Around noon, the sky turned black. My grandfather glanced at the clouds and muttered, "It's gonna break bad tonight." He was right. By evening, the wind was howling through the trees and rain came down so hard. We packed everyone into the big family tent, zipped it tight, and listened as thunder rolled over the ridges like cannon fire. The storm didn't stop. Around 1 a.m., I woke up thirsty. The lantern had burned out, but the rain had slowed to a steady patter. I unzipped the tent just a little, enough to stick my head out and reach for my canteen. That's when we saw them. Footprints, barefoot, human, fresh. They circled the tents and disappeared into the tree line. I froze. The ground was slick with mud, the prints filling slowly with rainwater. Whoever made them had been there moments ago, maybe seconds. I ducked back inside, heart pounding. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it real. The next morning, the forest looked different. The air was thick and still, like it was holding its breath. My grandparents were quiet, uneasy. When I finally told my grandmother what I'd seen, she went pale. My grandfather didn't say a word, just reached for the old shotgun he always brought camping. He checked the chamber, loaded a few shells, and kept it within arm's reach the rest of the day. By nightfall, the storm had died, but the woods hadn't gone back to normal. There were no crickets, no wind, not even the sound of the river. Just silence. My grandparents insisted all 3 of us kids sleep in their tent that night. My brother and sister fell asleep fast, but I couldn't. I could feel it, that heaviness again. That sense that something out there was watching. When I heard my grandparents whispering outside the tent, curiosity got the better of me. I unzipped the flap just enough to peek out. My grandmother was sitting by the fire, hands trembling in her lap. My grandfather stood a few feet away, shotgun raised, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the tree line. He wasn't moving, just staring. Then, without warning, he raised a hand, the signal for silence. That's when I heard it too, a crunch of leaves. Footsteps circling just beyond the firelight. I felt my stomach drop. Whatever was out there was big, heavy. It wasn't trying to be quiet. It wanted us to hear it. My grandmother whispered, "Don't you come closer now." Her voice was shaking, then the sound stopped. The woods went still again, too still. My grandfather took a step toward the edge of camp, shotgun raised. "Show yourself," he shouted. Nothing. And then, out of the blackness, something moved. I didn't see its face. Only a shape. Tall. Human-like, but wrong. Too long in the limbs. Too smooth in the movement. My grandfather fired once. The blast through the trees like thunder. The thing screamed. Something deeper, guttural, wet. It charged forward, and my grandfather fired again. My grandmother screamed for him to run, but before I could even process what I was seeing, chaos erupted. The fire burst in a shower of sparks. I saw my grandfather swing the shotgun. The thing lunged, knocking him backward into the dark. My grandmother ran toward the sound, shouting his name. I stumbled out of the tent, only to be grabbed from behind by something cold and slick. I screamed. It felt like a hand, but the fingers were wrong, too long, too strong. I thrashed and kicked until my grandmother tore me free and pulled me toward the tent. I looked back once and saw only flashes. My grandfather disappearing into the woods, the flicker of movement, and then nothing. When my parents arrived the next morning, he was gone. We searched for days with the help of local volunteers and park rangers, but there was no trace. No blood, nothing. They said he probably got lost in the dark. But I know what I saw. We never went camping again. My grandmother died less than a year later, and I haven't set foot in those mountains since. What I'm about to tell you is without a doubt the scariest damn thing that's ever happened to me. And the craziest part is it all went down just a week ago. I still can't shake it. It was me, Kevin, and Lillian. We've been tight since we were kids. We've been through it all together. About 5 years ago, we started hiking every summer, hitting a new stretch of the Appalachian Trail each time. This year, we picked one up in Maine, way up north where the trees grow so thick. We'd never been there before. Lillian and I were excited, but Kevin, man, he was in a bad place. His girlfriend of 3 years had dumped him, messy, ugly breakup, and he'd been spiraling ever since. You could see it in his face. He barely talked, barely ate, and when he did speak, it was just this flat, dead tone like he wasn't really there. We tried everything to lighten the mood, jokes, stories, even a few dumb ghost tales around the fire at night. But by the fourth night, it was like he'd sunk into some hole we couldn't pull him out of. That's when I remembered the bottle of whiskey I'd stashed in my pack. I hadn't told them about it because 1, I knew Lillian would give me hell for bringing booze into the wilderness, and 2, it's just not smart out here. When you're this deep in the woods, your senses are your lifeline. But I also knew Kevin. This wasn't his first heartbreak, and I figured maybe a couple sips might get him to loosen up a bit. So that night, when the fire was low and the forest had that heavy, whispering silence, I pulled out the bottle. Lillian gave me this quick look but didn't say a word. I think she understood. Kevin's eyes lit up like a kid at Christmas. "No way," he said, grinning for the first time all week. "Just don't overdo it, man," I told him. "We gotta hike tomorrow." He laughed, already uncapping it. Yeah, I got it. Of course he didn't. Within an hour, he'd put down half the bottle. But honestly, it worked. It was like flipping a damn switch. Kevin started telling stories, cracking jokes, doing impressions. He was alive again. For a while, it felt like old times. We sat there laughing under the stars. The woods wrapped around us like a dark sea. We ended up turning in late, close to midnight. I remember thinking, tomorrow's gonna suck, but at least he's smiling again. It must have been around 4 a.m. when I woke up. At first, I didn't even know why. Just this weird sound, low and broken. Then I realized it was a laughter. Some guy was out there laughing in the middle of the damn forest. At first, I thought it was Kevin. Maybe he got up to pee and was laughing at his own stupid joke. But the more I listened, the more I knew it wasn't him. The laugh didn't sound right. It was too sharp, too unhinged. like whoever it was trying to sound human and failing. Then, Lillian burst into my tent. "Oh my God," she whispered, her face pale. "That's not Kevin, he's still asleep. There's someone out there." My blood ran cold. I grabbed my gun and stepped out into the dark. The air was thick and wet, the kind that sticks to your skin. The fire had gone out and all I could see were shadows stacked on shadows, and then I heard it again. That laugh. It came from the trees just ahead of us. High, cracked like someone losing their damn mind. "Kevin," I hissed. "Get up, man!" "There's someone out here." He stumbled out of his tent, groggy, blinking. What the hell's going on?" "Shh," Lillian whispered. "Listen," we all froze. The forest was dead silent for a second. Then he laughed again. Closer this time. It was so close I swear I could hear the saliva in his throat. "Hey," I shouted into the dark. "We're armed. Don't mess around." The laughter stopped. Then after what felt like forever, it came from behind us. "Oh my God," Lillian gasped, spinning around. How did he move that fast?" "I don't believe this," Kevin muttered, eyes wide now, fully awake. "This is freaking me out, man." I aimed my gun toward the sound. "Show yourself, bastard," I yelled. "I'm not kidding." The only reply was this twisted giggle that melted into wheezing, then silence. We stood there like statues, just breathing, waiting. Every sound in the woods had died. The wind, the bugs, even the trees. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then, right next to Lillian's tent, not even 10 feet away. He. It wasn't human anymore. It sounded wet, like it was coming through water. Lillian screamed, and I damn near fired a shot. But there was nothing, no movement, no shadow. Just that voice echoing between the trees. "Come on," Kevin whispered. "We gotta get out of here, man. Right now." "We can't move in the dark," I said, voice shaking. "We'll get lost." "So we just sit here and wait for that freak to come closer?" And we did. We sat there the whole night, huddled by what was left of the fire, listening. The laughter would fade, then start again, sometimes right beside us, sometimes far off. Every time I thought it was gone, it came back. When the first streaks of sunlight hit the trees, I swear I've never felt such relief in my life. We packed up and one booked it down the trail. Didn't even eat breakfast. No one talked. Not a word. By the time we made it to the nearest town, we looked like we'd seen a ghost. Kevin said he didn't remember much after the laughter started. Lillian said she saw something move between the trees. Something tall. But she wouldn't describe it, and I swear on everything, if I ever hear that sound again, I won't stick around to find out who or what it is. It's been more than 25 years. My family had lived in the same Appalachian hollow for generations, rooted so deep you couldn't pull us out if you tried. Thatcher was my best friend, same age, same kind of fool. His folks lived just down the ridge. We grew up together, hunting crawdads in the creek, building forts out of fallen logs, and swapping stories by the fire while the old folks whispered warnings about the woods. "Don't go past the ridge after sundown," they'd say. That September, my parents went out of town to visit my aunt. I was supposed to stay home alone for the weekend, but Thatcher's folks let him camp over at my place. We decided it was the perfect time to do something stupid. Finally spend a night camping deep in those cursed woods everyone told us to stay out of. We left just after midnight, our flashlights slicing through the blackness like dull knives. "Damn, it's darker than I thought," Thatcher muttered. "No turning back now," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. We hiked for nearly half an hour before we found a small clearing and dropped our gear. The forest around us pulsed with noises, snaps, rustles, far-off cries that didn't sound like any animal I knew. Still, we laughed it off, lit a small fire, and tried to act normal. Later in that moment, when I saw the Thatcher face, he froze. "Do you see that?" he whispered, pointing past the tree line. Through the branches, a dim reflection caught my eye. Something. We thought maybe it was an old car or hunting gear, maybe even a poacher's truck. Curiosity got the better of us. We grabbed our flashlights and crept closer. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No crickets, no wind, no night sounds at all. Just that heavy silence pressing on us from every direction. Then through the trees we saw it. An old car half buried in the brush, rusted and covered in grime. The driver's door was open and next to it stood a man. He was digging. His back was to us. His movement slow, deliberate, the shovel hitting something solid in the dirt with dull, wet thuds. Thatcher leaned close. "What the hell's he doing?" I didn't answer. My mouth went dry. There was something wrong about the way he moved. Mechanical, like he wasn't tired or even human. Then my foot snapped a branch. Crack. The sound sliced through the air like a gunshot. The man stopped for a second. He didn't move. Then slowly he turned his head toward us. I'll never forget that mask. White, smeared with dirt and something darker. Something that looked too much like dried blood. The eyes behind it were hollow pits catching the faint light of our flashlights. "Run," I whispered, but it was too late. The man started walking toward us, shovel still in his hand, the blade dragging through the dirt with a metal scrape that made my skin crawl. Thatcher bolted first, crashing through the trees. I turned to follow, but the man's voice stopped me cold. "You shouldn't be here." I could hear Thatcher yelling my name somewhere behind me, but my body wouldn't move. "Please," I managed. "We didn't mean—" He raised the shovel, tilting his head. "What did you see?" Nothing." "We didn't see anything." He stepped closer. I could see now that the thing he'd been digging wasn't a hole, it was a grave. And something was wrapped inside it. Something human-sized. My voice broke. Oh my God. That's when I ran. I don't remember how far or how fast, just the sound of him behind me. Footsteps pounding, branches snapping. I could feel him closing in like the woods themselves were helping him. When I finally burst into the clearing where we'd left our stuff, I saw Thatcher fumbling with his backpack, crying. "He's coming!" I screamed. We didn't make it 10 feet before he caught me. His hand grabbed my shoulder and yanked me backward so hard I hit the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and the next thing I saw was that mask hovering over me. The shovel came down, burying into the dirt beside my face. "Listen to me," he hissed. His voice was low, gravelly, and far too familiar. "You tell anyone what you saw and I'll come for you. I know where you live. I know your name." He leaned closer, the smell of earth and rot pouring off him. "You think the woods don't talk? They do. And they told me about you." He lifted the mask just enough for me to see his mouth, a twisted grin under a scar that ran from his lip to his jaw. Then he let go. I scrambled up and ran until my lungs were on fire. When I reached the edge of the woods, Thatcher was there, sitting on the dirt road, shaking so hard he couldn't even speak. We didn't go back for our stuff. We didn't sleep. We just locked every door and window in the cabin and waited for morning. We never told anyone. Not our parents, not the sheriff, no one. We swore to take it to our graves. Thatcher's gone now. Cancer took him 2 years ago. After he died, I found myself thinking about that night more than ever. It clawed its way back like something that had just been waiting for the right moment to rise again. I've been solo camping for about 10 years now. People always ask why I do it alone, like I've got some death wish. But it's not about danger. It's about quiet. There's this stretch of the Appalachians I'd always avoided. Somewhere along the North Carolina-Tennessee border. The maps don't show much of it, and most of the trailheads are either overgrown or gone completely. My friend Liam, who's a ranger out that way, mentioned an old service road off Highway 143. He told me it hadn't been used in decades. No signs, no markers, just a rusted metal gate half buried in weeds. When I asked why no one hiked it anymore, he got quiet for a second and said, "People stopped going," said it felt off. That was all I needed to hear, so I went. Late October, when I parked near that forgotten gate, mine was the only car around. No sign anyone had been there in a long, long time. The path started wide enough for a truck once. You could tell by the way the trees bowed over it, but it had shrunk down to a narrow, game-worn trail that twisted uphill through thick brush and slick stone. After about 5 miles, I hit a ridgeline overlooking a valley so deep it looked drowned in its own fog. Not a single roof or fence in sight, just endless green turning gray with the season. I set up camp near the edge where the wind could still reach me but not enough to pull the tent loose. Built a little ring of stones for the fire, boiled one of those sealed pouches of stew and let the heat soak into my hands. Everything about that first night felt right. Too right, maybe. When it got dark, it got really dark. That Appalachian dark where the trees close over you and the sky just disappears. I remember leaning back, watching the fire breathe and die down, thinking how easy it would be to vanish out there, how no one would ever know where you went. I crawled into the tent around 10:30 and fell asleep quick. The next morning, fog, thick enough that I couldn't see 20 feet out. No birds, no bugs, no wind. It was like someone had taken the batteries out of the whole forest. I've woken up in silence before, but not like that. This wasn't stillness. It was absence. I hiked a short loop along the ridge just to stretch my legs, then came back and sat near camp sketching the hills in my field journal. That's when I saw it. About 15 feet down the path, right in the center, was a branch sticking straight up out of the dirt. It wasn't fallen. Someone had jammed it there. Hard. The bark was stripped clean. The top was splintered like it had been twisted off. I figured maybe wind or a storm had done it somehow, though I knew that didn't make sense. I pulled it out, tossed it into the woods, and tried not to think about it. That night I made a smaller fire. Ate, read, watched the flames, but that feeling from the morning, that awareness, hadn't gone away. I kept glancing over my shoulder without meaning to. The woods felt charged, like the air before a storm. When I finally zipped into my tent, it was quieter than before. The kind of quiet that gets inside your head. I must have fallen asleep because when I woke up, it was 2 a.m. on the dot. No reason, no noise, no dream, just suddenly awake. I lay there for a second, not moving, trying to figure out what had stirred me. That's when I heard it. Whispering, not words, just the sound of someone whispering. Soft and breathy, like they were trying to form words without voice. It came from right behind the tent, low to the ground. I thought maybe it was the wind, but the air was still as glass. Then it moved, slow, dragging, from one side of the tent to the other. I held my breath. Couldn't even blink. The whispering circled once, then again. Then I felt it and something brushing along the nylon wall. Light but real. Fingertips. I could see their shadows moving. Long, slow strokes from the ground up. I don't know how long I lay there. My body felt frozen, like if I moved, whatever was out there would know. My heartbeat was so loud I thought it might give me away. Then the brushing stopped. Silence. And then, from the side of the tent, 5 long streaks appeared. Dark, oily lines dragging from top to bottom. I didn't see the hand, just the shadow of it. I stayed like that until the gray light of dawn started to bleed through the fabric. My throat was dry. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I finally unzipped the door, the fire pit was cold. Nothing looked disturbed. No footprints, no broken twigs, nothing. Except the wall of the tent, 5 black marks. Long and perfectly spaced, like someone had pressed their fingers in soot and dragged them down in one smooth pull. That was enough for me. I didn't eat, didn't pack carefully. Just stuffed everything into my bag and got the hell out. Half a mile down the trail, there it was again. Another stripped branch, standing upright in the dirt. I walked around it. Then another one. Then another. They started appearing faster, and every couple 100 feet, then every few yards. I stopped counting after 17. Each one perfectly straight, bark peeled clean. When I finally broke through the tree line near the road, I saw my car. But then I noticed movement in the woods across the lot, something standing there. It was tall, too tall, and thin. I got in the car so fast I don't even remember unlocking the door. Slammed it shut, started the engine, and tore out of there. I didn't look back. That tent is still in my garage, folded exactly how it was that morning. The black streaks are still there. I've never washed them off. I don't go near the Appalachians anymore after that, honestly. You ever make a decision that seems fine in the moment, but later you realize it was the worst mistake of your life? For me, that decision was saying yes to a winter camping trip in Rocky Mountain National Park. It was Max's idea. It's always Max's idea. He's the kind of guy who thinks every near-death experience makes a good story later. "You'll love it," he said, tossing me one of his bright orange beanies. Fresh air, no crowds, just us in the mountains. It sounded nice in theory, except it was February, and the park had been hit with a storm system that made even the rangers issue warnings. But Max had planned it for weeks. And when Max gets that look in his eyes and that restless, hungry look, there's no talking him out of anything. We weren't going alone. His older brother Nate and Nate's girlfriend Layla were joining. Nate was ex-military, the kind of guy who treats hypothermia like an optional challenge. Layla was calm, quiet, and always seemed to be smiling at something no one else could see. The drive up the mountain felt like crossing into another world. The snowbanks got higher, the roads narrower, until it felt like the car itself was holding its breath. We passed through Estes Park just before sunset, the last sign of civilization for miles. From there, the road wound into the trees, past trailheads buried under snow, signs half buried, cabins shuttered for the season. We stopped at Glacier Gorge. The gate was closed for the winter, but Nate had a backcountry permit. The trail beyond the barricade was nearly invisible, covered in untouched snow. I remember thinking it looked like a blank page, beautiful but empty in a way that made me uneasy. We hiked for hours in near silence. The snow muffled everything. Even our footsteps sounded wrong, too soft, too far away. I could feel the temperature dropping with every step. The trees grew taller, darker, until the world around us turned into a cathedral of ice and pine. When we finally reached the lake, a frozen white expanse under the looming cliffs of Hallett Peak, Nate said, "This'll do." We pitched camp near the tree line, close enough to see the lake's edge, far enough to stay out of the wind. By the time the fire was lit, the sun had vanished. The mountains swallowed the light so fast it was like someone flipped a switch. For a while, it was almost peaceful. We sat around the fire eating soup from metal cups, while Nate told stories about people getting lost in these mountains and the ones who vanish in winter and are found months later when the thaw comes. Layla laughed softly and said, "You know, they say some of them don't die of the cold, they just wander off." I remember the way her voice sounded when she said it. Not joking, not quite serious either, like she was repeating something she'd heard from someone who believed it. Later that night, I woke up cold. The fire had burned out and the tent walls were pulsing faintly with light, the reflection of the moon on the snow outside. The stillness was so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat. Then something shifted outside. It wasn't a sound, more like the silence changed shape, the way air feels when someone steps into a room behind you. I thought it was Max getting up to pee, but his sleeping bag was still zipped tight beside me. I sat there listening, every nerve in my body awake. Then came the crunch, snow, slow, deliberate steps circling the tent. I held my breath and watched the faint shadow moving across the nylon, a shape too tall, too thin. It passed once, twice, then stopped right beside my head. I swear I could hear it breathing. I reached out and shook Max, whispering his name. He stirred, groggy and irritated, and until he heard it too, that soft, rhythmic crunching. Then nothing. We waited for what felt like forever. When we finally dared to unzip the flap, there was nothing there, no tracks, no movement, just untouched snow stretching out into the trees. The next morning, the entire camp was a disaster. The fire pit had been scattered. Our food was torn open and thrown across the snow. Nate's tent had a long, clean slash running straight down the center like it had been cut with a knife. "Who the hell did this?" Max muttered. "An animal," Layla said, but even she didn't sound convinced. Nate crouched by the torn fabric and frowned. "If it was an animal, where are the tracks?" That's when we noticed it. The snow around the tents was completely smooth. No prints. No drag marks. No signs of movement at all. Just 4 sets of our own boot tracks half filled by the night's snow. By mid-morning, we'd agreed to pack up and head out. But when we hiked back toward the road, the trail was gone. Buried, twisted. The GPS wouldn't lock. Compass needles spun like they were drunk. It took us 6 hours to reach the parking lot, or where it should have been. The car was gone. Not snowed over. Gone. We stood there staring at the empty space, and for the first time I saw Nate look scared. He scanned the tree line like he expected something to step out. "We're heading back," he said, voice low. When we finally did find the car hours later, it was sitting half buried near Bear Lake, miles away from where we'd parked. The keys were on the driver's seat. No one said a word the entire drive back down the mountain. But halfway through the canyon, Max gripped the steering wheel. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated, eyes fixed on the road.
"I had a dream last night," he said quietly.
Something was in the tent, crouched over me, watching. I tried to laugh it off. "A dream." He shook his head. It didn't have a face. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because deep down I knew what he meant. I had felt it too. That presence pressing against the walls of the tent. We never talked about it again. Not then. Not ever. This happened a little over 10 years ago, give or take. I was 21, maybe 22. My buddy James and I were camping out on his uncle's property down in southern West Virginia, not far from where the ridges start to fold up and the cell service just quits. We used to head down there every fall, just a weekend to fish, drink, and sit by the fire where nobody could bother us. The land sat right along an old cattle farm, half of it still fenced, half gone wild with briars and sumac. That night we'd set up camp by the creek, cracked open a couple beers, and were halfway through telling dumb stories when we heard the first noise. It wasn't much, just a low bellow off in the dark. Sounded like one of the neighbors' cows had wandered too far again. James groaned. "Uncle Rick's gonna kill me if we lose another one." See, his uncle still leased the lower pasture to a guy who ran about 20 head of cattle through there. They'd been known to slip the fence before, and since we had the ATVs with us, we figured we'd be the heroes of the night and round the cow back up before dawn. So we grabbed our flashlights, hopped on the four-wheelers, and headed down that rutted trail that wound through the woods. It was one of those nights where the fog sits heavy near the ground, and your light beam feels like it's cutting through soup. The bugs had all gone quiet, which should have been my first clue something was off. But we were just laughing, talking, not really thinking. Maybe a mile down the trail, James slowed up. "What the hell's that?" I came around his side, and there in the middle of the dirt road, swear to God, sat a deer recliner. One of those ugly, faded brown cloth ones you'd find in your granddad's den, except this one was on fire. No gas cans around, no one in sight, just this recliner burning steady, flames maybe 6 feet high, the fabric popping and spitting like it had been soaked in lighter fluid. The smell was awful, sweet, thick, wrong. We killed the engines and just sat there for a second staring at it. James laughed, but it was nervous. Probably some kids screwing around, but out there. We were 10 miles from the nearest paved road, and the fire wasn't new. It was steady, controlled, like someone had started it on purpose. That's when I noticed the dark shape off to the right, maybe 15 feet from the road. I thought it was another chair at first, but when I walked closer, the light hit it, and I realized it was one of the cattle. Dead, throat slit clean. The grass under its head was black and wet, and flies were already on it even though it couldn't have been dead more than an hour. James cussed under his breath and took a step back. Jesus, man. What the hell? That's when I saw the eerie footprints. Bare feet by the look of them. A dozen or so, smeared in blood, leading away from the cow and across the road. They disappeared into the dark brush on the other side. I remember saying, "We should call somebody." But there wasn't any signal out there, and James didn't want to leave without checking for the other missing cattle. So stupidly, we followed the footprints. The trail led us through an old fence line, barbed wire half rusted through, and strung along the top strand every few feet were paper plates. Dozens of them. Each one had something painted on it. Circles, triangles, lines, none of it made sense. They spun and flapped in the wind, clinking against the wire like bones. James muttered, "Someone's been out here doing weird shit." No kidding, we kept walking, slow now. The sound of our boots crunching gravel and leaves louder than it should have been. After a bit, the trees opened into a clearing. I swear, what I saw next still wakes me up some nights. There was another recliner, burning just like the first. Around it stood maybe 10 people, men and women all in these off-white robes that looked like they'd been sewn by hand. No faces visible, just shadows under hoods. They were chanting, and every so often one of them would dip a pitcher into something and spit liquid into the fire. Each time they did, the flames hissed blue. We froze. Just stood there in the dark, hearts pounding. I remember thinking it had to be some backwoods church thing or meth heads playing preacher. Then one of them stopped mid-chant. Head turned. I don't know if they saw the flashlight glint or just felt us watching, but the whole group went silent. James whispered, "Run," before he even finished the word. The nearest one started screaming. Not words, just a sound, and the rest of them moved. Fast, we bolted. Crashing through the brush, I could hear feet pounding behind us. They were now chasing at us. We hit the ATVs, damn near fell over trying to start them, and tore back down that road like hell was behind us. I looked over once, swear I saw torchlight flickering through the trees, but maybe that was my brain filling in blanks. When we made it back to camp, we packed up everything in record time. Neither of us said a word on the drive back to James's uncle's house. Just sat there in silence, engines humming and hearts still racing. His uncle Rick didn't believe a word at first. Thought we'd gotten drunk and spooked ourselves. But when we told him about the dead cow, he called up a couple neighbors, old-timers, rough men who didn't scare easy, and they all grabbed rifles and piled into the trucks. We went back. It was maybe 2 hours later, tops. But when we pulled up that same road, the fire was gone. The recliners were gone. Even the dead cow, gone. All that was left were ashes here in the road, a few faint footprints, and one paper plate tangled in the fence. The thing had melted in spots, but you could still see a red handprint smeared across it. Looked fresh. The old man got quiet then. Nobody said a word for a long minute. Finally, Rick said, "Let's go." Next morning, the sheriff came out, walked the site, took pictures, scraped up what was left of the ashes. They found some glass shards near where the recliner had been. Looked like maybe a broken bottle. They sent it off for testing, but all we ever heard later was that it came back as human blood. After that, folks in the holler started talking. Stories about a cult meeting in the woods. Some said they were devil worshippers. Others said they were a splinter group from one of those revivalist churches that got twisted over time. No one ever proved a thing, and no one ever found the missing cow. For months, James couldn't sleep. A burning recliner in the middle of nowhere. A dead cow with its throat slit clean, and a line of people in robes, standing dead still in the firelight. There was a purpose to what they were doing. Ritual, maybe. Something old. Anyway, that was my scariest event that I shared with you.